Hello, and welcome to the Navigating Childhood Cancer podcast. In this podcast, we explore all aspects of a child's cancer diagnosis. We'll speak with parents, experts, caregivers, and maybe even the children themselves to understand the issues, the risks, the struggles, and the triumphs. My name is Heather, and this is the information I wish I had when my child was diagnosed with leukemia. Thank you for being here, and welcome to episode 7. Today I am thrilled to let you know that I am speaking with my first guest. As you know, with this podcast I aim to speak with other families who have experienced childhood cancer, to hear their stories, and to learn from their experiences. Suzanne is the mother of a young boy named Frankie. Frankie was diagnosed with leukemia in 2012 when he was just 2 years old. At that time, the treatment protocol for pediatric leukemia was 4 years, so Suzanne and her husband spent 4 years supporting their son while he received treatment. Happily, Frankie is now a healthy 13-year-old boy. Incidentally, Frankie plays hockey in the same league where my 3 kids all learned to play hockey. When my child was diagnosed with leukemia in 2021, Suzanne, who I didn't know at the time, reached out to reassure us and to offer her support. She said, "I'm sorry to hear your family joined the club no one wants to be a part of. I wish your child the absolute best in recovery." She then went on to provide us with a list of resources that she thought we might find helpful. And she said, "If any of this interests you, I'm an open book and I don't mind chatting or sharing. Some families prefer not to be involved, and that's totally cool too. Feel free not to reply if you don't want to." I admit that it took me some time to reply to Suzanne, but I was so happy when I finally did. She was warm and caring and reassuring and positive. I was so happy to hear her story, and I'm so pleased to be able to share it with you now. Before I do, I just want to apologize for the audio in this podcast. As you may know, I'm new to this, and I'm still working on my systems. I expect that future recordings will have better audio quality. I've decided to release this episode as it is, despite the imperfect audio, because I think that the message is just that important. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Suzanne about her child Frankie and their family's experience with childhood cancer. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so thrilled to speak with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and to share your experience. As you know, our goal is to try to get the stories of families who have been through this previously, to share those stories so that other families who are going through this experience might have something to learn and hopefully feel like maybe they're not quite so alone. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, and I appreciate you pulling this together because it'll help a lot of families.
I hope so. Great. So I'd love to start if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about you and your family.
Okay, so we're a traditional family, mom, dad, boy and girl, dog, and we also fostered a guinea pig, which we ended up keeping. So we're a full family, and people call us the menagerie household. Like everyone ends up here, animals end up here. Just come on in. So we're very busy.
Yes.
And that's our family structure.
Okay. And tell us about how your experience with childhood cancer started.
So it was around Christmas time. Actually, it started before that, but we didn't even know what we were looking at. And I remember we were walking through Hyde Park, and my son was complaining. He was tired. He was 2 at the time. And we're just like, oh, he's just being lazy, come on. And like, let's get him walking. And so my husband had to pick him up and carry him, but we just thought he was being lazy. Then around Christmas time, it was December 24th, he just seemed to be getting fevers at night and was lethargic. Christmas Eve, we open our gifts, and he wanted nothing to do with gifts. And we're like, okay, he's just sick.
He was 2 years old?
He was 2.
He was 2.
At the time.
Okay.
Christmas Day, we went to see a pediatrician that was on call for our pediatrician. Said he had chewed the inside of his mouth, it was infected, because we noticed it was all chewed up on one side of his face, one of his cheeks. Then he gave us some medication, and we didn't end up taking it, but we went to our pediatrician and saw a different pediatrician who was also on call, and that pediatrician ended up saying, oh, that's the wrong meds, gave us different meds. A couple of days later, he was still lethargic, went back to our pediatrician. We ended up with another on-call pediatrician, because this is all during the holidays. Mm-hmm. And the on-call pediatrician luckily had worked in Emerge Sick Kids, and kind of said, okay, that, just when you go home, pack up your stuff and go to the hospital. It wasn't like this is an emergency. It was very nonchalant. He wrote up this form with all these symptoms that he saw and said, here, take this to sick kids. But it was, again, there was no mention of what we were looking at. Went home because I didn't think it was a rush. Well, I don't think it was a rush, because those few minutes probably would do nothing. Picked up my husband, went down to sick kids, and when we got there, gave them the note, and they took us in right away. And I'm like, wow, it pays to know the doctor, right? Because he had his name on there. Little did I know that it was going to be more than just him being a little sick. And as we're walking in, it was probably a nurse, kind of looked back and goes, you don't realize how sick your kid is. I was like, what? Like, what are they talking about? So we got in there, and they put him on an IV right away. Like, that was the first thing. And then they asked to do a second. I'm like, I can't do this. I just walked out. And we had picked up subs, too. Like, sorry, my mind just goes everywhere because there's so many things happening at the same time. We had picked up subs, and I remember they were on the side. And I was really hungry. But after, I remember someone talking about... it wasn't leukemia, but keywords for leukemia. And I'm like, are they talking about leukemia? I'm like, no, it would never happen to us, right? And I think that's everyone's thoughts. It'll never happen to us. And I looked at the subs, and I'm like, I think I'm going to throw up. I'm not even hungry anymore. Oh. So that's how we ended up there. And I just remember him lying there. He was still lethargic at that time, and just hooked up to 2 IVs. When they hooked him up, he didn't even touch. It was just like, yeah, do whatever.
Had the doctor that referred you to sick kids done any blood work at this point, or was there just symptoms that they were able to observe? Yeah, okay.
There were symptoms that he could observe. And it's stuff like, as a parent, you don't realize, like the enlarged stomach. And I'm like, oh, he's just eating well, right? He eats a lot of junk food, right? And I don't think anything of it. But yeah, that was one of the symptoms, is this big belly. And then I can't remember the name of those little red dots on your legs. Pickle something. And,
so he had red dots on his legs, extended belly, fevers, and he was lethargic?
Lethargic, yeah. And the fevers were only at night, which was funny, because during the day there were no fevers. It was just at night, which is so weird. Yeah, so I think those were the main... And then he had the inside of his mouth was all chewed up. But I don't think it was probably part of being sick.
I see. Okay. So interesting. So you were admitted to the ER swiftly.
Very fast.
And quite quickly after your admission, somebody mentioned the word leukemia.
Leukemia first. I think it was the words bone marrow that kind of started making me aware of what was happening.
What they were going to be looking for. Like, we need...
So.
Okay.
And they had mentioned other stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, so it might not be, once they started talking, I go, so it might not be cancer. And they go, cancer is actually better than the other alternatives. And I'm like, oh okay, lovely. Right? So.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, what a thing to hear. And then at this moment, your appetite disappears. And now you're...
Oh, yeah. Well, sitting there, and I'm like, the hunger it's gone. You don't even feel hungry. You don't actually feel numb.
Yeah. And you're starting to realize that it's not just a fever. There's something serious that you're here, and that they're starting to explore at the hospital.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And so how quickly after you arrived, received the
So,
diagnosis?
so when we arrived, they moved us up into ICU, and because I guess he was pretty bad, like little did we know, and he had a nurse just for him. They did, is spinal tap the right word? It's been so long,
Yeah.
so I think it was spinal tap where
Okay.
they test to see if there's cancer cells.
Okay.
So they did that, and that was like the 28th, 29th, in and around that time. The 31st, and I remember telling my mom, because this was New Year's Eve coming up, I'm like, Mom, we're just going to the hospital. We'll be back in a couple of hours, and then I'll help you with dessert, making desserts. And then on 31st, they took us to the 8th floor, where they told us that it was leukemia. And it's funny because I remember the doctor talking about all these things that you need to watch for, everything you need to know, and I don't know, you're just in a daze. You don't maintain any of this information.
Mm-hmm.
So they should actually have like a little handbook, like, here, this is what it is, and this is the stuff you need to know. Because he's writing it on the board, and we're still processing this. You just told us it's leukemia, and you're just telling this is a fever, and, just all these different things. And we're like, I'm not going to remember this, because your mind is elsewhere right now.
Oh, absolutely. You're trying to process. I mean, you went into the hospital with a fever thinking it was
the flu or something.
Yeah,
you just needed a little
Yeah, that's right. He maybe needed some fluids or some medicine or something. And now all of a sudden you're being admitted and you're being given this diagnosis of something that you hadn't ever considered or maybe even knew of before. I mean, that was for me something that it just hadn't occurred to me that this could happen to a child.
No, especially us. He's a healthy kid. Like,
Yeah.
where do you go from healthy? We don't have any history of cancer unless, an older adult, but that doesn't count.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and then my daughter had been 2 weeks before this. She had been in the hospital for something. They had to hook her up to an IV for fluids as well. So I kind of put the two and two together. Oh, yeah, this is what he has. And, who would have thought it would have been leukemia?
Yeah. So, and to your point as well, you're being also given a whole lot of information in that moment. It's not easy to understand or retain.
Photos and stuff as he went along, because my husband is he thinks ahead, I guess, and he was like, okay, I'm going to take photos of this, because
Oh, good. Okay.
I had not thought of it.
And Suzanne, what year was this? When was this?
It was December 31st, 2012.
Okay, so this was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
One thing I'll just mention. So 2012 was, 9 years before our experience. So I will tell you that we were given a binder. When our family received this diagnosis, we were given a binder that contained every bit of information that we could expect. Not the first night. The first day that we had the diagnosis with the doctor, it was, information on the whiteboard in our hospital room. But about a day or two later, we were given a binder that had, like you mentioned, all the information about the fevers, all of the information about, what to look for, what treatment is going to look like, what the schedule is going to be, etc. So, I hope, did you receive that binder? Do you recall?
I do recall there being a binder, but I don't even think I went through it. Like, it was just, there was no time, to be honest,
Yes,
to kind of wrap my head. We were there at the hospital for, I think it was 3 weeks at the beginning, and then we went home. He still had all these fevers, so he had to go back, and he was probably back in there for another 2-3 weeks. So we spent a lot of time at the hospital, but it was, I feel like there was no time to even look at this binder, and I don't know why, because we're stuck in a room. He wasn't allowed to go anywhere, but it was, maybe I just felt too much time cuddling him, and that was it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like, gosh, you can be forgiven for not feeling like diving into this binder that's filled with medical information about a disease that you really don't want to have anything to do with. Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But I was just wondering whether, because I felt the same, that there was all this information in the beginning, and I was still reeling from the news, that it was sort of felt impossible for me to understand everything that they were saying. And then same thing after with the fact, I'm like, what did they say? What? Even the information that as I started to share it with my family was a little bit inaccurate, because I was trying to reiterate stuff that had been told to me when I was in the middle of like shock, right? I was in a very stressful, shocked state. And anyhow, but then we certainly had meetings after that with, our child life specialist and, people who helped us to try to understand exactly what the path forward was going to look like. But certainly the first 24 hours, I guess I would say, was just a blur. An absolute blur.
And blur is the best word for it.
Yeah,
for sure.
So you were, as you said, you were admitted and hospitalized for weeks at a time. First, the beginning of the treatment. Okay, so first I want to step back. Leukemia, was it acute lymphoblastic leukemia type B? I believe that's the...
Pre-B, yes.
Yep.
And
Okay.
we were low risk at the beginning. And you know how they fatten them up with steroids. And then they do another test at the end of the 4-week period to test to see if you're low risk. But he ended up, it didn't work out the way they wanted it to work out, and he ended up being high risk.
Okay.
So he was swapped out from low risk to high risk.
Okay, after that first 4 week.
Yeah, so he just had a more aggressive treatment than the low risk.
Okay.
Minimal amount, but the numbers are the numbers, and that's what they went with.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. So what's remarkable is, or this was news to me, is that the first 4 weeks of treatment, the induction phase, it's possible for them to completely eradicate the cancer cells in that 4-week period. So at the end of the day 29, I think it is, when they do the first test after that phase of treatment, it is possible that the child could have a negative MRD, is what we were told.
Yes, that's the word. See, I don't remember any of that.
No, well, I mean, we've been through it more recently, right? And again, I'm not the one to describe what that negative MRD, minimal residual disease, I believe it's called. But if it's negative, it means there's no trace of cancer cells in the child's body. That was a surprise to me, that it would be possible for them to achieve a negative MRD after those first 4 weeks. Yeah. But what you're saying is that test that was done on day 29 did not generate a negative MRD, which put him into a more of a higher risk category. Yeah. Which meant that then dictates the path forward, right? Like the treatment plan will go in one direction or another depending upon what the result is at that 4-week mark. So what was that like for you at that moment? I mean, that was probably heartbreaking, yeah. So you've been through all of this treatment, and now they're telling you, well, it wasn't as effective as we'd hoped.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going back.
I know. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm asking you to relive this again.
I guess at that time when they tell you that, you just think the worst, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. When you have already been through so much, and now they're giving you this test to tell you, to sort of see if it's working, right? To see how it's going. And then, it's as though the news itself wasn't hard enough. Now you are now being put into a new category, which again, the wording is very, very difficult. Difficult to hear, right? You move from low risk to high risk. And did that change things going forward? Like, what does that mean? What did that mean for your child's treatment? Did they explain what that meant for what was needed to go forward?
Honestly, I don't even remember what changes would have been, like if he was low risk versus high risk. I do know that the pages were swapped out, and this is what you're getting now instead of this. But it happened several times through treatment as well, because you're always going in for blood work, and if it's not where they want it to be, then they swap out your plan for something else. And so it's I guess this is why cancer parents always learn to be flexible, because it's always changing. Everything's always changing. It's like, oh, this didn't go the way we planned. Okay, let's do this now. And you have to learn to just go with the flow, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. And to be prepared for a little bit of disappointment, right? So you go in with the intention of starting the next phase of treatment, or everything is contingent upon that blood work, right? And the blood work comes back telling you that maybe, it's not quite where we need it to be to go forward today. Well, let's try again on Monday. And that is hard. Really hard.
It is. Yeah. So Frankie he went through a lot of fevers. So that was our thing. He was always in with the fever, always in with the fever. And they went through the first 3 weeks. They finally, we have pictures of him with ice all around him, under his armpits, over his forehead. They're always icing him. He was always on ice, this kid. And I would say after 3 weeks, his fevers were able to subside, and they had to be gone for his temperature had to be normal for 48 hours before they would release you. Mm-hmm. At that time, I don't know if it's still the same. So we finally got a 48 hours then of no fever, which was great. So we were able to go home at 3 weeks. We went back in to get his port put in. That would have been on my daughter's birthday, January 31st. Oh. And sure enough, he spiked a fever while there. And we're like, great, another 48 hours. And it just didn't go away. So this was another thing we had to kind of deal with, is while he's going through these fevers, they couldn't figure out where the fevers were coming from. And then we had one doctor who was kind of feeling around, goes, something doesn't feel right in his abs. And he had something on his liver. So they had to do an extraction, and it was just the needle, but they had to take him to the operating room and pull this extraction to check out what it was. So they were able to kind of remove the fluids that was there, and then that was whatever infection it was able to go, but it wasn't showing on blood work. Oh. This was something that just by feeling the ab is how they found it, because the blood work was showing fine. There was nothing in his blood work. And that took about 2 to 3 weeks for them to figure that out as well.
Wow, to determine what was the source of the fever. And it was an infection in his liver?
It was something on his liver, and then they had to kind of do the syringe and pull out the fluids that was in it, and then it healed.
Okay.
Or they knew what it was, and they were able to give the right antibiotics.
Okay. And did that end the fevers? Or I know that, children in treatment are susceptible to fevers on a good day. So, but that sounds like that, at least that particular issue was resolved with the help of that discovery.
That was, yeah. And then there was a time, and I don't even recall what it was about. It could have been tied to that, where he had to carry an IV machine. Those machines, they're made for adults. So he had this big machine that he had to carry, and it was always feeding him antibiotics. And we ended up getting him Thomas backpack for it, because they had a doll tall as he was. These machine bags. It was as tall as he was, and he couldn't carry this. So he had a Thomas backpack, and the nurse knew him as the kid with the Thomas backpack.
And can you tell me a little bit about what it was like with a toddler? So you mentioned that when you first went into the hospital, he was lethargic and was sort of laying in bed in the beginning. You mentioned that he had a port insertion surgery. And what was it like when you had to go into the hospital on a regular basis to give blood and to have blood work taken or for treatment when you're dealing with a 2-year-old?
It was hard in the sense that hearing you was going to hurt, which is kind of like, I don't want to do it. Where he didn't really have the verbal expressions at the time. Like, it was like no, and like he didn't really talk much. So it would be like no, but we already knew hurt, And I remember I remember him saying that, and that really took me. Because I was like, okay, I got to pull myself together for this kid. So the port accessing, I think, was the hardest part for him. He did love, funny enough, doing the lumbar punctures.
Oh, he did.
The
Okay.
doctor in the lumbar punctures always gave him a little car. So we have this huge collection of Mattel dinky cars, and because every time he went for a lumbar puncture, this doctor would come out with a little car. Which car do you want?
Yeah.
Or can you clean this up for me, make it look pretty? Like, he always got Frankie engaged with this. And he liked the feeling, because when he was able to express himself, because I love the feeling of like just being knocked out.
Yeah. Well, of course it requires a port access prior to the lumbar puncture, right? So he had to go through the difficult experience of but then getting to lay down onto the stretcher and go to sleep for a little while, then he doesn't have to deal with, the difficulty of that treatment. And he gets a car afterwards.
Sorry?
And he gets a car afterwards.
Yeah. Well, he got it before he went in.
Oh, before? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We actually found, there was, I don't think it was Emla. I think there was a different cream we found. And then we put some sort of less sticky tape over it. Oh, Saran wrap. That's what it was. Saran wrap, the clean Saran wrap. So that when we got there, they didn't have to peel it off, because he hated that as well.
Okay.
Just peeling off the stickiness, he hated that. So it was like Saran wrap over the numbed cream.
Okay. This is a good point. Before the port is accessed, we use an EMLA patch for like an hour beforehand, so that it numbs the area, so that when they go to insert the needle, the child doesn't feel it. But it had never occurred to me that the EMLA patch is sticky and it needs to be removed like a Band-Aid. So that would be hard for a child who's 2 years old. Okay, so so you had to come up with a creative way to get the numbing cream on his skin and hold it there for that hour.
I think that was like 2 years into treatment that someone had brought it up with us. And I was like, oh, why did no one tell us this before?
Aww.
And it's actual Saran wrap. I think it's called cling wrap. It's some sort of a different version of Saran wrap.
Okay. Like a medical version. We used EMLA patches throughout. So, did they, nowadays they also have these, I don't know the name of it, but it's a little purple, it's almost like a wet nap, and it's used to help more easily remove the sticky stuff. So,
does it smell?
No, it doesn't smell like it's like a medical grade. I don't know the name, but it's like it's like a little packet where they open up like a little tiny wet piece of fabric, and they can use that to remove the EMLA patch without as much pain. But they also use it to clean any sticky stuff that's left over after, if a Band-Aid is used, or an EMLA patch, or if there's any kind of that stickiness that's left on the skin afterwards, that removes all of it. So,
they had something like that, but it was I remember it smelling, and for us it didn't really do anything, because you still have to get underneath and still remove it. It's like that didn't work for him. So the less sticky, the better. And I know they got like to cover the access port. There was some sort of a special covering that they got instead of the regular stuff. It was padded, and then they would always cut a little heart in it for him.
Okay. They're so great at trying to make it a little bit better, right? Or trying to make it a little bit easier for the children. But I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I just when you're in that room waiting for your child's port to be accessed, and the toddlers and the little kids are upset, I can imagine that must be so hard. I always sort of, my child and I talk all the time how hard this must be for toddlers and parents of toddlers, when the child maybe they know, right? When they come into the hospital, they know exactly what's going to happen once they get there. They learn quickly. You've raised a good point, that the child doesn't necessarily know how to express how they're feeling about it, there's a lot of tears, there's some screaming. That's kind of how the kids communicate that they don't really want to go through this, right? And so it does also make sense that, having the opportunity to go to sleep so that they don't have to experience it would also be, I can see how that might be preferable to a child. Yeah.
See, and my husband and I talk about this, and we think it's harder for the older kids because they know what being diagnosed with cancer can mean, as where a little kid, they just go on about their daily day after they're done their treatment for the day, then they forget about it, then they're off and running around, and where the older kids is kind of like, well, this is crappy because, sometimes things don't work out, and when you're a little kid, you don't think about stuff like that. The parents, yes.
Yes, yeah.
But the toddler doesn't realize what it means in the long run.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So, parents of older children don't have the same struggle with trying to encourage them to be willing to have their port accessed. But they do have the struggle of trying to handle maybe the mental health of the child that's maybe worried about what's going on, or there's still a bit of struggle there. My child understood what was happening and why we needed to be at the hospital and why this treatment was so important. But that didn't really make the disappointment about the fact that we had to do it any easier, right? It's just, but different challenges at different ages. And I've always just felt so much compassion for the parents of toddlers and the little children. It's just, oh my gosh, it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear what you say about I scared. Gosh, that one hit me when you just said that.
I remember when he said that because this was at the beginning, I was falling apart all the time. And then when he said that, I was like, okay, take a step back. You got to be strong now for him. It took him saying that for me to realize that he's being affected by this as well. It wasn't just about me. So.
Yeah, but that's a unique challenge, though, trying to stay, like you said, falling apart. I was falling apart. How do you remain strong in a moment when you feel yourself incapable of handling this story or this situation? It's too hard. And see, and you and your husband were there together. Were you able to be in hospital together? Were you able to?
Yeah. So I would sleep with him on the bed, and my husband would sleep on the cot there. And sometimes we would swap. But I was happy that we didn't get him the crib. We got a regular bed so that we could cuddle up with him and enjoy those moments since we're there.
Okay.
And I didn't mind it at all. Yes, because we're there, you can kind of, keep it up. I even just check and make sure he's still breathing. Even when he came home, that was one of the things. Just putting my hand on his chest, make sure he's still breathing. I was always paranoid. You go through when they're newborns, and then it's like, oh, I'm doing the same thing again.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So that actually is something that hadn't occurred to me, that he might be in a crib. Of course, there would be children small enough to need to have a crib in the hospital room instead of an actual bed.
I think he asked us, and we said, no, a regular bed, because I wanted to cuddle with him. And it's just, and my husband and I took turns, but I'm very let me be there.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would both stay in the hospital together with your son.
I remember one time they said, well, one of you guys we're going to change it so it's only one allowed, but they never really enforced it.
Okay. So. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
In our experience, it was 2021, so it was during COVID. And at that time, there was only one caregiver allowed per patient in the hospital, with the exception of a couple of meetings that we had where we were both able to be there together, but certainly only one caregiver was allowed to spend the night, which was actually okay because there wasn't room for all of us. And also other children. So who was helping you with your other child at home while you were going through this?
I think everyone kind of took turns taking my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. It's all a blur. I don't even know.
You don't remember?
Probably
Oh.
my parents took her for a bit. I know my sisters did, my sister-in-law. And then I know when, at some point, we ended up going back to work. So my husband would work night shift, go to the hospital during the day, and I worked during the day, and he went, and I would sleep there with my son. So this was, I think, probably the second round of having to stay in the hospital with fevers. That's probably when things, because at some point you have to go back to some sort of a normalized life.
Yes, yeah.
So we kind of took turns, and that was, we would come up the ramp down at the hospital, swap, and one would go off to work and get home, get changed, and then come back and then swap. So we would never even go into the garage. It was just swapped vehicle, like swap drivers, and then
wow.
one was upstairs. And I remember one day going, "What if someone kidnaps Frankie?" And my husband's like, "Who's gonna go kidnap a kid who's hooked up to stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." Because I'm always paranoid about leaving him by himself in the room.
In the room. Yeah. I see. I hear what you're saying, like that little roundabout out front of the hospital. You pull up, you and your husband tag team. One goes in, one comes out. And, staying in the hospital is not easy. So I would also expect that it's kind of important to go home and get a good night's sleep from time to time, right? When you're there for the long haul, you do need to kind of go home. As hard as it is to leave your child and your partner at the hospital for a night, but you do also need to go home into your own bed and get a full night's sleep after all of this. As hard as that is to do.
I don't think we had the luxury to do that because we had to work as well. So it was, whomever wasn't working was at the hospital, and then it was just the swap, and then we'd go home, take a quick shower, and go back. So before or after work, that was our life. We made it work, and that worked for us. So, and then at some point, his company laid him off because back then they didn't have EI for critically ill children. So his company was nice enough to, you know what, we're gonna, because they were closing down at some point, so they laid him off earlier so that he can at least collect EI. So he was the main caregiver at some point.
We were talking about your daughter, and family members sort of stepped up to help you take care of her while you were both in the hospital with your son. And you were also talking about how you were trying to manage work as well as your hospital visit. So finishing a day of work and then heading down to the hospital to go spend the night in the hospital with your child. How did you manage that? And my goodness, it sounds like that would be exhausting.
You know, you do what you gotta do, and it becomes routine. It's like you think, oh, that person has it hard, but it becomes a routine, and it's not even hard anymore. It's just your way of living after.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, my husband would go to work at night during the night shift, probably go home, eat, change, come to the hospital with a car. We'd swap out. I'd most likely go home. I don't even remember, but I'd probably go home, get changed, go to work, and then once I was done, go back to the hospital, swap out with him, and then he'd go. It just became a way of making it work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure everyone, it's like, you look at other people and you're like, oh, that must be hard, but you just adjust to it. I think you adjust to your newish life.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. You do what you have to do. And then you get to a point where you, at least I did, felt like I just needed to have a moment. I mean, I guess the other part of it too is that your child eventually came home from the hospital, right? Those first few weeks, it sounds like you had 2 long stretches of being hospitalized. And then after a certain point, you're home again, but you're still needing to go back to the hospital regularly for treatment, right? So, oh, and you mentioned that there was a certain point after which your husband was no longer working.
Yeah, so because when we found out, oh, this is what it entails, and it wasn't once or twice a week that we had to be there. It was like 3 to 4 times. And I had just started a new job, so it's, how do you ask? And I remember calling on New Year. It was either December 31st or on the 1st, and telling my boss that, yeah, I'm going to take a few weeks off. And like, who's going to, and I'm like, who's going to believe this, right?
Yeah.
So you're on during the holidays, your son gets sick and not coming back to work for a while. So it's kind of weird, I guess you think of it as when you're a teenager and everyone's trying to play hooky.
Yeah.
But,
well, hopefully they believed you. I mean, gosh, that, it becomes a 2-year ordeal. So
she was an amazing boss.
Oh, good, good.
I think she knew me better than that anyways, but it was just so weird because I just started this job. I hadn't been there for, I think it was like 6-7 months. And then I need like pretty much a month off to start with, or I don't even know when I'm coming back. But so we made that work.
I find people tend to, obviously people have a business to run, right? People have jobs that need to be done, but at the same time, it becomes so unimportant, right? When you have a child that's this sick, really, of course, we worry about who we're letting down by not being able to do the work that we're supposed to be doing, but it's also sort of secondary, right? Everything else falls to the wayside because we have to focus on the one most important thing, which is helping the child. But we still have bills to pay, right? We still have to try to maintain our employment and get the work done. This was pre-COVID, so remote working was probably not as much of a thing at that time. So you had to be in the office during the day?
We did have to be in the office, and my husband worked in a factory, so that was, both of us had to actually go in and work.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
boy.
I remember at one point we got something from work where it was a key and you can log in to your computer from outside of the office, but that was later on, and it was so slow. It's not like nowadays after COVID, it's a whole different ballgame now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all set up now to work remotely, and that actually did help for me during that time. I was able to, bring my computer to the hospital with me and get stuff done during those long quiet periods where people were sleeping. My partner also started a new job just prior to this whole thing starting for us. So while his company understood when he needed to take time off and was very understanding, we felt that he needed to focus on his job. And I was the one who was doing a lot of the trips down to the hospital just in order to allow him to be able to just keep the job, right? He had started a new job. We didn't want to jeopardize that in any way. And that just felt really crappy because he often wanted to be at the hospital with us. He wanted to be bigger part of it. And in some cases, I felt like my work was always getting put on the back burner because I had to take the time to go. I'm self-employed. And so that was possible. Thankfully, it was possible. But there were moments when that sometimes got frustrating because it just felt like I could never really get to my work. And someone commented to me at a certain point, like, why don't you take a leave of absence? Can't you take a leave of absence because you're going to be... And, I don't know. I look forward to hearing from people where that's possible, but that certainly was not available to us. So, so we're trying to work through it all. It sounds like that you were doing the same. And oh my gosh, trying to then go to work after having spent the night in the hospital, that just sounds really, really hard. Because...
Well, I got the better end of the stick because at least I could sleep. Yeah, it was kind of, with nurses coming in, you're waking and going to sleep, waking and going to sleep. But my husband had to be awake during the night, then go to the hospital, and probably would have little naps in between.
Yeah.
And go back to work. So...
Oh, that's so hard.
I think he got the worst end of it.
Yeah. Wow. Do you think back on, like, does it seem, when you think of it now, do you remember it being really difficult, or were you sort of running on adrenaline and just making it happen?
Just went.
Yeah.
There was no thinking. It was just go, go, go.
Yeah. Okay. And then what was it like when you got home? So you were hospitalized for it sounds like 2 sort of bursts, 2 periods of time there in the beginning.
Needless to say, before he was diagnosed, we sold our house and bought a house. And our move-in was during the time we were at the just right after he was diagnosed, so that first 3 weeks of us being in the hospital. So I didn't even know how we were moving houses when we're at a hospital.
Oh my
so
goodness.
His family and his brother and a bunch of friends came, packed everything for us, moved us to the new house. They did everything because there's no way we could have done this. They even set up our beds.
Aww.
Which was nice.
Oh,
yeah,
that's nice.
But it was, I forgot we had that move.
So that was actually going to be one of my questions is like, what helped you during that time? And what were some of the things that people in your family or your community did to help you through? And it sounds like helping you set up your new home was one of those things. That's really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, that was stressful because it's how do you move a house when your kid has just been diagnosed and you're at the hospital all the time, not knowing if he's going to make it or not make it, and if you're there and it's like I have to move as well, and because this is a couple of weeks after his diagnosis, we had to clear out our house and move to the new house. So that was one thing, and then we got flooded.
Oh no!
A couple of months later, that 2013 flood.
Oh my goodness! So you had oh boy, dealing with the flood.
It was a tough year.
Yeah, I bet. Oh my gosh! And then you're like, okay, come on, what else can you throw at us? We can take it.
Yep. And then it was the ice storm that year too, and then our fridge went.
Oh boy.
And I know, I just remember it was just one thing after another in 2013, because I'm like, 2013 is a lucky number for me, and I'm like, it's going to be a great year, and it was like, you start off with December 31st, 2012 as this is your diagnosis day, and then it was like, go, go, go. Everything after that was just, okay, can this year end now? Yeah. And it was the ice storm in December, because it was around, it was at Christmas, because our fridge wasn't working, our fridge broke down. Yeah, and then we need a new fridge, and we didn't get a fridge for about a month. So, luckily, it was cold enough to put stuff outside.
Oh my goodness. your milk in the snow bank?
Yeah. Well, we put it in the garage, but it was cold enough where you can keep your stuff outside. But it was just a year.
Wow. So what was New Year's Eve 2013 like for you? That would have been a year after the diagnosis.
It would have been our year, but you know what? Honestly, I didn't really think much of it.
You weren't.
Just kind of move on to the next year, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. The other question I had for you was about the hospitalization at the beginning, and then you received the news after the first month that he became a high-risk patient. And then when did things start to improve for you? I think there's another test that's done 6 or 8 weeks after that point to determine whether...
I don't even remember that.
No,
I think you're right, but I honestly don't even remember to see if it was working. I think there was, yeah.
Okay. So, but obviously the treatment was effective ultimately. And
yes.
And he is now a healthy young boy. He's doing well now?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Becoming a little man now. He just turned 13, so...
Wow.
He's
That's
like,
wonderful.
"Ooh, now I have teen in my number."
Yeah.
I'm like, uh-huh.
Okay. So, was it a 2-year protocol for you at that time?
4.
4 years, okay. So...
4 years. As we were finishing our 4th year, that's when they were changing it to 2-year protocol.
Okay.
The way we were told, the way it works is they do analysis over 5 years, and then every 5 years they change the protocols.
Okay. So 4 years in treatment.
4 years, yes.
And do you happen to recall when it started to feel manageable? I mean, I'll just say that for us, the first 11 months were really hard. And then it started to moved into maintenance when our visits to the hospital started to become less frequent, and the medication started to feel a little bit easier, and life started to get a little bit back to normal. Do you recall what that was like for you? Like when treatment started to feel manageable for you? Or did it ever?
I would say the first year is the hardest for sure.
Okay.
He did end up being allergic to the asparaginus.
Okay.
I said that right.
Yeah. So that's right. That's one that's really common, that there could be allergic reaction to that chemotherapy.
And that just complicated things, because rather than now just getting it into your delivered through your port, now they got an injection to the leg, which hurts. And
oh no.
on top of that, he had to stay in the hospital for almost a full day because they had to make sure something would flush out, or I can't remember what.
Okay.
My husband was the one who was at the hospital during all this because I was working.
Okay. So did he have a reaction? Is that how they found out that he was allergic, or did they know prior that he might be susceptible?
He had a reaction. So the first time there was no reaction, and the second time I wasn't there. It was my husband, and the way he told me, it was like they already watch, like they already know to be watching for this. And as soon as the medication, because he was watching it through the drip going in, and as soon as it hit into his body, the second time he was getting this, he started screaming. It was burning, and he was like put his hands like to his throat and chest, and so apparently there was like 20 medical staff in the room trying to get him back to where he should be.
Oh my gosh! So they've like, it's an emergency. The child is having an allergic reaction to this medication, and they stop it immediately.
Yeah, so I would assume so. They would disconnect him, but then it's like now you're on a different. Again, this is where the flexibility comes in. Now we're on a different. We get a different plan.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's right. So they've got to adjust the plan going forward. But first, you have to go through this traumatic experience of having your child have an allergic reaction to the medication. Oh my goodness. I recall that they were monitoring closely whenever giving this medication, and also that not reacting the first time doesn't mean that you're not going to have a reaction the second time or subsequent occasions.
That's correct.
Oh boy. And then that changes maybe a different medication will be substituted in for that one. Okay. And then
he ended up with the medication that I was saying that it was a shot to the thigh, and apparently it was quite painful. It was rough. Rather than getting this thing that just goes through your port, now it's a shot to the leg.
Oh boy, it's like insult to injury on top of everything.
Sorry?
I said it's like adding insult to injury, like on top of everything. You have one more thing to consider. Oh, you guys had a lot. That was a lot.
Well, everyone has their journey, and everyone you talk to, they have a different story. Yeah. So there is no one symptom or one plan. Like everyone has different triggers, different medications. Everyone's plan is different. I guess you've noticed talking to so many people that what brought them in was different from another person.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. The symptoms are all different, and the experience too. I mean, again, we're talking about quite a lot of time difference between when your child was being treated and my child was being treated. So the protocol is even different, despite the fact that they had the same form of cancer. The other question I wanted to ask you is school. So after. Obviously, when he was diagnosed at the age of 2, he was not in school. But within the next 4 years, he would have been ready to start kindergarten at age 4.
Yeah.
So during treatment, did he go to school? Did he start school as planned at age 4?
He did. So, sorry?
At age 4, he started junior kindergarten?
Yeah, so we did start him in the JK. Our fellow told us that he recommended he go to school.
What was it like for you sending him to school, knowing that he was a child in treatment? Tell me a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, sending him to school was scary, and I was going to keep him home, but our fellow doctor, can't remember his name, he's amazing. He was like, he pushed us. He goes, no, just send him to school, have a regular life, he's fine. You know, the only downside is that he did get a lot more fevers than if he was at home, because you get you're open to a lot more germs, I guess. So we did have a lot more hospital visits, but I do not regret him going to school. He was able to start a social life outside of home. He did get treated differently. Like his teachers, like very much like coddled him, like us as parents would. I remember at one of get to know your teacher events, the teacher said, "Oh yeah, there's all these pillows that the kids would use for their nap time." But Frankie had his own pillow.
Oh, okay.
This for Frankie so that he wasn't exposed to a lot more germs. So she was very particular. This was Frankie's pillow. And I know she babied him because we always kind of pushed our kids to be independent as much as possible so they can get their winter coat on. And she was telling us that he would look and like with his eyes and go, "Oh, can you help me?" I'm like, he knows how to dress himself. And she goes, "Wait, how can you say no? How can you say no to him?" I'm like, "You can."
Oh, that's interesting. Like, you're probably trying to teach independence, and his teacher is trying to give him a little bit of extra attention and coddle him a little bit based on everything he's been through at that point.
Well, yeah, and I think they feel sorry for him as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't blame them. I get it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. And he was accepting of that help.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He knew how to play his cards, and like even if I went to pick him up, because he was still going to the hospital on a regular basis at that time, so we'd have to go pick him up, take him down for treatment, and just remember one girl was carrying his backpack, and I'm like, "Why is she carrying your backpack?" Because she wanted to, and I'm like, "What do you mean she wanted to? Like, you can carry your own backpack." And then even in there was one girl who would pull out his lunch for him, open it up for him, and then put. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like the teacher's telling me this, and I'm baffled.
That's cute. So, did the kids in the school know his situation?
I think they did.
They did. Yeah.
I wasn't kept from them. Like in terms of what they know about cancer, probably very little. Just that he's sick. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned that, yes, especially when you're 4, you're exposed to all the germs when you finally get into kindergarten. Had he been in daycare prior to that? So, like, or what was it like when, in the early days of treatment, when you were both working and you were no longer in the hospital? So from age 2 to 4, was he in any form of daycare at that point, or was he home with you?
No, he was home with us.
Okay. Okay, so when he started in JK, that was the first experience that he had going out of the house into a school environment.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he got exposed to all the bugs, all the germs. And
yes.
so there was an uptick in his fevers and whatnot at that time.
Yeah, and then back then it was like you had to be fever free for 48 hours. So we already knew as soon as we went in. It's like, okay, we're 2 days in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
We already knew the drill. At some point they did change it, and I don't know if the protocol's different now, but at some point they're like, "Well, you know what, you guys understand, we're going to send you home, but if anything changes, or you just call us." And so at some point they were like, "Okay, you can go home. We've seen him. We're happy with what we see. It's just probably a viral infection, and just go home."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was the same for us. The fevers in the beginning were much more serious, and we had to be in hospital for 48 hours. But toward the end, I mean, we're still in the tail end of things right now, but a fever that happened recently only kept us in the hospital for 6 hours. Like the whole episode was only 6 hours. And like you said, they do all the tests, they monitor, they make sure that things are stable, and then we're sent home with kind of instructions for how to monitor it and to make sure that, if it gets worse, come back or anything like that. But yeah, and it gets easier as we get towards further away from the intense treatment, for sure. So, and yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I remember several times he would have a fever at home. We'd get there, and it's gone. It's gone for the rest of the 48 hours.
And then you're kicking yourself because you're now in hospital for 48 hours. It's so hard, right? Following the protocol, but the impact that it has on your day-to-day life is immense.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. But you also raised a really great point about going to school and that your doctor encouraged that for the benefit of your child to have as normal a life as possible. Having the opportunity to socialize, to having the opportunity to be in that environment and learn and be in the care of the teacher, etc. Was that hard?
For me, yes,
Yes.
because
Okay.
you're always afraid of something going wrong. And I mean, even at the school, they were really good about calling if he had, or if he seemed off, or there was something going through the school. They would always call me and say, okay, this is what happened, or this is what's happening, and do you want to pick him up? So they were always on top. Even the secretary there, oh, she was amazing. Always, always, this is what's going on. I thought you should know. It's up to you what you want to do. And just, I think measles went around at one point.
Oh
And
my.
like, yeah, we're taking him out because when you go through treatment, all your immunity's gone. You're starting from scratch. So the measles could be bad for him or anyone going through treatment. So, and they were aware of that, so they made sure that we knew everything that was going on.
Oh, good. Okay, so they communicated with you that there was measles in the school?
Everything.
Oh my
There
goodness.
was measles at one
Wow.
time.
Wow. And did Frankie know to be careful? Like, I mean, what does he need to do to be careful? There's not, I guess, not much that a 4 or 5 year old needs to do. Just wash his hands. I don't know. Like it.
Washing his hands was the big thing, but it's
Yeah.
also difficult because you can't go by yourself, and I think by the time you come back, you've already touched everything all the way back anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But we did have sanitizer, and I remember kids were not allowed to take sanitizer to school because it's flammable.
Okay.
The pre-COVID days, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Now everyone has it, but at the time you were not allowed to take it, but they made an exception for him because they knew, like, he has to clean his hands and before he eats.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And was there mask? Yeah, yeah. Everyone's got one dangling off the back of their backpack. Was he wearing a mask at all? Like, was masking even a thing yet?
No, it wasn't. No.
Okay, so he was not needing to wear a mask at that time. That's good.
No.
That's good.
But if it was now, like if he was going through treatment now, going to school, I would definitely be putting him in a mask.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's so tricky. COVID has created a real, wrench in all of this.
We look at things differently now, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say that our doctor also encouraged, not for the first year, the first 2021. Yes, for the first year of treatment, school was not an option because COVID was raging at that time. But by the second year, when my child was in maintenance, we were really encouraged to send them to school for that purpose, like mental health, social life, all that stuff that really, really wanted to see the children back at school again. And that didn't come without risks, right? That's hard. That was really, really hard. But school is so important, and I've never understood that more than after COVID. I mean, COVID alone, when all the children were out of school, we realized how important it is for them to be out there in community with their peers. And then you add this experience to the mix. It's it's important for the kids to be out there with the other kids, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I agree.
So, and I loved that about the hospital, that they were considering that too, right? That we have to weigh the risk from a health perspective with the need for that part of the child's life to be taken into consideration. So they're looking at the whole child, right? So that was important. Yeah.
Risks versus benefits.
Suzanne, I've taken up a lot of your time today, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending this time speaking with me, but I just have a couple of more questions. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about how treatment ended and what that was like for you as a family. What was it like for Frankie, but also what was it like for you?
So when treatment comes to an end, it's a relief, but it's also, the downside is now you're going to the unknown. There's no more treatment. What's going to happen after treatment is stopping medication going to bring it back? And every time he had a fever, I remember every time he had a fever, I was still calling him, like, okay, he has a fever, like, what do I do? And they're like, oh, it's fine, just monitor him. But there's always that fear of something going wrong or coming back. And you're not being followed as closely as you are when you're in treatment. So, and I echo like what all other parents have said. It's that fear. Like, there's no medical staff really following you like 24/7 like they were before. Now you're going in, and I can't remember if it's once a month at the beginning, and then it starts extending every 3 months, and then at some point it becomes once a year. And eventually you kind of get over it, but it's hard at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's really hard to kind of get past that, we're done with treatment, now what?
Oh, I can appreciate that. I'm not there yet, but I feel so much comfort at the hospital. Like, just being there makes me feel supported. And yeah, knowing that someone's watching the numbers and that, we're getting checked out regularly still. Of course, we're looking forward to the end, but at the same time, I anticipate that struggle. So is it currently once a year that you're being evaluated? Yes, you're back once a year.
Yep. So I would say 2 years ago, they swapped him over to once a year. So, and I don't even remember if they did blood work. I don't think they did. I think he just went in and they looked him over, did his weight, went through some studies, whatever studies they asked for, and I guess or whatever. As long as it doesn't involve poking him, go for it. So it was a saliva test of some kind. And we're like, yeah, just go for it. Yeah, so, yeah. Once a year now.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's wonderful news. Did he ring the bell?
No, we didn't have the ring the bell.
They didn't have the bell then?
Until after.
No. Okay.
We know where it is.
I hear so much about this bell, and I know that it's sort of become a big deal, but I also hear that some people are not interested in ringing the bell.
I remember ever being offered, even talking about this
bell.
bell.
No? Okay.
Nikki, it's been just over my head when they mentioned it. I don't know. I don't remember a bell.
Okay. Well, maybe it's a new thing. I don't know. I'm not sure. So one of the episodes that I recorded previously, I talk about music and how important music was to me during this whole time. And I'm just curious about whether there are any songs that take you back to that experience or anything that sort of got you through. I've got a little playlist that started, and I would like to add to it the music from other families that I speak to, and I just was wondering whether you had any songs that you'd like to add to that playlist.
I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I will think about it.
Okay.
And if I do come up with something, I'll let you know.
Okay, like, great.
I listen to pretty much everything. I'm more of a hard rock kind of girl.
Oh, yeah?
So
okay.
Not something you want to put on your list.
Oh, sure. There are so many different types of music and so many different types of music that help you through different times, right? So, there's music that you need when you're trying to process some difficult news, and there's a different music that you need to listen to when you leave the hospital for the last time after final treatment. So, all of them qualify.
Well, think about it. I listen pretty much to everything, though. My main thing, though, is hard rock, and I think during that time, hard rock was my go-to music, and I also ride a motorcycle, which I did enjoy. I actually got it during his treatment time.
Okay, great.
I haven't ridden at all yet this year, but we haven't taken that out of the garage. It's another story.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my thing at the time.
Okay. Wow, that's great. So get on the bike and go for a ride to clear your head. No.
Yep.
I didn't know that. That's really awesome.
Well, I got my license back in my early 20s, and then I think, I don't know if it's just everything that I went through, it was that urge to get a bike again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And I'm pretty sure it had something to do with it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that does. The last question that I have for you today is whether you have a message that you'd like to deliver to other families who might be listening to your story today.
I think the one thing I tell families, like at first, for me, I was whatever the doctors want and the nurses want is, just go with what they say. But at the same time, if you feel that something is not right, be the advocate for your child. Don't be afraid to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was one time that we went to immersion. I remember the nurse couldn't access the port. They do it, well, back then it's like once a year they would do it. And it really upset me because they were digging, trying to get, and I'm like, no, just remove it. If you can't do it, get someone else to do it because this is your child and they've gone through enough. Yeah. And the other protocol they had was that if you went in with a fever, they would have to access your port to take blood from there and peripheral. And I was like not comfortable doing both because it's why you double poking. And one of the things I told them, and I think you always would do it, and then at some point I'm like, no, you're just going to do the port. If you can't figure it out from the port, then you can do the other poke. But it's, you don't learn about this till after that. It's not necessary. Like, it's better, but the grand scheme of things, it was one of those things that didn't need to be done, in my opinion, unless they found something in the port that required more blood work.
Okay. And I love this point that you are there. You're a child's voice, right? You're advocating for your child throughout the entire experience, especially in a case like yours where your child is not yet able to articulate how they're feeling or what their preferences are. So that's a great reminder to remember that you get a say.
Yeah, don't be afraid. If it doesn't feel right, question them.
Mm-hmm.
Question. And the hospital's great, but you know what? There's certain things, like everywhere else, that things can get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. How is Frankie doing today? So you mentioned he just turned 13, and
he's actually at Campfire Circle right now.
Oh,
he's gone for the week. Yeah,
that's amazing. Okay, we didn't even talk about that, but please tell me, what's that like? Has he been before?
He does it every year. He does get anxiety and he doesn't want to go. And every year we'll go through the same thing where he starts getting upset and crying, I don't want to go. But once he comes back, it's like, yeah, he had fun. So it's that anxiety of going away from home. Like, we also got him umping, so, umpiring for baseball. And
okay.
That anxiety goes through that whole motions. I don't want to go do it. I don't want to go do it. But then when he gets there, goes through it, it's like, it wasn't bad. But it's the unknown and not a routine thing. And it's something I'm going to have to kind of figure out and maybe get him some help for, because I do think he suffers from anxiety.
Okay. You encourage him to continue to go?
I do.
And he always
have fun.
He has a good time.
He comes back and he's had fun. It's just the getting there, getting him there.
Okay. That's wonderful. And so how many times has he been? Did he go during treatment?
He did, yeah.
He did? Okay.
So they have doctors and nurses on staff, hence I don't mind him going. I know he'll be well taken care of, and I don't think you've done this, but whatever the kids want done, as long as it's safe and, they'll do it. They'll do it.
Like, do you have an example?
So if they say, well, you're going to roll yourself in black paint, you're rolling yourself in black paint.
Oh, wow, okay.
The counselors, not the kids.
Okay.
The kids say pretty much what they want to do, and the counselors are pretty good, as long as it's not, like I said, not dangerous to anybody. They're willing to make things work for these kids so that they have a great, great time.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, I'm so happy to hear, and I can't believe that that's where he is today. That's wonderful. Campfire Circle is incredible, and I'm so happy to hear that he's still going and that he's having such a good experience. That's wonderful.
They have it for siblings. you. My daughter loves going. She's the opposite of Frankie, where she's like, I want to go, I want to go. Okay, so we sign her up. And I know they have a leadership training canoe session in September, which I signed her up for. She doesn't know yet. But she'll be so excited to do it.
Oh, good. So is she doing it every year now as well?
She does. She missed out this year because we just somehow missed some vaccination. Well, one set of vaccinations from when she was a baby.
Okay.
And they noticed it, and I went to the pediatrician. She's like, "Oh no, she's all done," and she's not all done. So they missed. She only got one set of vaccinations, so she's missing the second.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how we missed this, but whatever. It's been years, but we just need to get her all caught up, and then she goes back.
Okay. Wow, that's wonderful. I'm so happy that your kids are involved in that. It's great to hear.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah, that's
Send
wonderful.
Your kids, trust me, they'll have fun.
I'm working on it too. Not successfully yet, but I'm still hopeful. So, Suzanne, thank you so much for your time today, and also for sharing so much about your story and your life, and for sharing all of these details about your child's experience, as well as yours, and yours as a family. You've been through so much, and I applaud every bit of information that you've shared today, as well as the advice that you've shared. I thank you so much for sharing it. Such a help to other families, and to be honest with you, it's a huge help to me as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
Well, thank you. And you're very welcome.
Okay, good. So I guess I will see you at the arena in September.
I'll be there.
Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And okay, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day today. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Okay.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more, you can find us online at navigatingchildhoodcancer.com and on social media at NCC Podcast. If you and your family are on this journey, I am so sorry. I hope that you'll stay and listen, and that you find something valuable here. If you'd like to share your perspective, please reach out. If you know someone whose child is living with a cancer diagnosis, I also invite you to stick around and to share this podcast with your community. Truly, we can only get through this together.